I've interviewed so many people since this project started, and I've learned that when somebody's telling you what they're going to do, oh, I'm going to go to rehab, I'm going to get back, I'm going to get my kids back, I'm going to get my life back together, I'm going to, or even commit suicide. Like the one woman said
Right.
she was going to commit suicide like 9 months, I think, after the interview. I've learned that that's a list of things you're not going to do.
Right. Yeah.
It's really funny.
Yeah.
It's like I'm listening to this, but I know damn well you're just telling me what you're not going to do.
Right. Right.
And the people who actually do get clean from drugs, the people who actually do commit suicide, the people that actually do get their kids back, they quietly go off and do it themselves.
Right. Yeah. And one of the things I learned through this process, I've had friends take their life without warning. Actually, people that you wouldn't suspect. And I remember those last moments that I had with them. And if I would have known, I would have at least given somebody a hug. And not necessarily tried to talk them out of it, but to let them know that I would walk with them in it, because I do understand it. So in my journey, I decided to tell people and tell my friends and give them opportunity to say goodbye to. So, and I wanted to say goodbye properly. I wanted to not only give them that opportunity, but for me, because I don't think anybody wants to commit suicide. It's the torment that I feel, the torment that on a daily basis, on a regular basis, that people don't understand. I have an amazing group of people. I have an amazing group of men that I'm surrounded by that are strong and powerful and good people. They're smarter than me, all of them. And they think differently than I do. And that's why they're in my life, is because they're these powerful individuals that have a positive outlook on life and have a different upbringing than I had. And so I try to hold on to that, but I found it's just not enough.
So you're saying you're going to commit suicide at when?
Well, we'll get to that, but my date was in about 3 weeks. And yeah, this is the 4th time I've planned it.
Okay, so that tells me right there that you sometimes.
Yeah, well, and this is a spiritual thing for me also. It's.
Why are you contemplating suicide?
Do you want to start from the beginning?
Yeah, let's start at the beginning.
All right, let's start.
I always like to start there.
So one of my earliest memories that I have, and of the few that I have, when I was a kid, was being molested. That's one of my first memories. And I'm guessing that was around 4 or 5, and it was by a male cousin. And after it happened, my mom kind of knew something was wrong. And she asked me if everything was okay, but in that moment, I knew I needed to lie, because I knew it would destroy the family and us, or at least blow things up. And so I just lied about it, and I never told anybody until I was in probably my 20s. And then one of the other memories I had was my father was a linesman, so we moved around all the time. I'm originally born in Iowa and moved to Colorado when I was around 9 or 10. Timelines are a little difficult for me because of probably the trauma that happened during those times. But Mom and Dad, from my understanding, I don't remember any of the fights. The only fight I ever remember is the last one, and I wasn't there for it. I just saw the aftermath. But based on that aftermath, I can imagine they were very horrific, very abusive.
Between your parents?
What's that?
Between your parents?
Yes, yeah. My mom is very aggressive. She's 4'11", and she takes no shit from anybody, and that is not a good thing for them. She'll punch anybody. She'll scream at anybody. If she doesn't get what she wants, she's just as mean and rude as can be. And if she were sitting here today, sitting here next to me, she would tell you that she's never done those things. And that, there's memories like when I was 17, she pulled my sister up by the hair up basically 2 flights of stairs. And then proceeded to smack her around and call her names and call her a lesbian when she wasn't doing anything. It's just my mom snaps at various times, and whoever's in the way gets the punishment. So we end up in, I'm guessing New Mexico when I was 4, 5, 6, somewhere in there, whenever that kindergarten, first grade era is. And I was standing on it was a parking lot with trailers on it for school, and nobody wanted to play with me. I felt very alone. I felt very like I didn't belong. And that was reinforced throughout my childhood and even into when my memory started, when I finally woke up around 10 years old. That was like a pinnacle point for me in life, was 10 years old. I don't have many memories, actually almost none from 0 to 10, just scattered little bits and pieces, like a spider web that you can't make any sense of, that's not methodically put together. It's just a discombobulation of thought. So there's always question. I always question myself, am I remembering something correct or not? Because I don't have a clear picture of what was going on at that time. I do know I was severely damaged by the time I was 10. When I woke up and I had my first memory, I was shattered. I was broken as a child. I didn't know who I was. I didn't have identity. I didn't have confidence. I didn't have security. And there's reasons for that. Part of that was probably the physical abuse, probably the sexual abuse. And then we'll add a lot of spiritual abuse in there and stuff like that. But so kind of had the whole gamut of, if there's abuse to be had, I kind of went through it in some form or fashion. But 10 was when I woke up and I shattered. That year, I believe I would have been about 9 then, but it was my 10th year that was where I fell apart. It's where the anger started. It's where rage became my best friend, and it protected me from the things of the world that I thought were going to hurt me. Because my experience at this point had been that, to the best of I guess you don't shatter like that as a kid unless you've had a lot of trauma. So on my 10th birthday, we buried my aunt. This might be tough for me to talk about. I've only gotten through this once. She was 25, I believe, and she was one of the first helicopter flight nurses in Des Moines, Iowa, for Mercy Hospital, I believe is where she worked. And her shift, she was off and then took somebody's shift because they were sick. And the helicopter crashed. It was the first helicopter crash in, I think, the history of life flight in Iowa. And she was on that flight. And 3 days later, we buried her on my birthday, insistent from my grandfather, from what I understand, that we buried her that day. It wasn't, there was no consideration for how that might affect me. Nobody talked to me about it. I have maybe a memory of that being at the graveyard that day, but I know we went to the funeral, went home and cut cake and celebrated my birthday. From that time on, my birthdays have been very bad, per se. I've had very few good birthdays. And a lot of those birthdays were knockdown, drag out fights with my mother, or yelling and screaming, or, just whenever it came to a holiday or a birthday, it was just pure chaos. in the home. My sister, who is my half-sister, is 4 years older than me. I grew up with her, and I have another sister and two brothers that were much older than me from my dad's first marriage. My dad was 40 years old. My mom was 20 years old when they got married, so there was a 20-year gap there. So when I was born, my dad was 40, and made him, although very spry and young and healthy, he liked to go play. He liked to work hard and play hard. So he wasn't around a lot. And that left me with my mom a lot. And apparently when my dad got home, that's when shit hit the fan most of the time. So around at that 10-year-old age, we moved away from Iowa, which was devastating for me because I lost all my security and family and friends it was a very small town, so we grew up around a lot of people and I had a lot of different moms and a lot of different father figures per se, and then a lot of friends growing up with that. And we left it, and it just absolutely, it devastated me, to say the least. Just that in of itself, and then my aunt dies, and then my grandfather, my grandpa Day, he died, which he was such a nice man. He was such a beautiful man, probably 5'4", and just beautiful, just a beautiful person. My grandmother, my grandma Day, beautiful people. And we moved away from that. We moved away from that security, but my grandpa Day died that year, and that was devastating. I do remember being at the funeral. He had cancer and a couple different kinds of cancer. I think bone cancer and skin cancer and some other internal cancers that, he was a carpenter, so maybe it was asbestos that he was always working around back then. I have no idea. But he withered away, and I do remember vaguely that happening. But that was really hard on me as well, and I'll tell you why here in a second. But that same year, my grandpa Bill died, and he was my step-grandpa per se. I didn't know any different. He was my grandpa Bill. He lived in Omaha, Nebraska, and he worked in something to do with the tunnels that go underneath the city, and he would take us down there. He'd take me hunting. I realized just recently that's where my love of bow and arrows came from. He was a bow hunter, and he was such a nice man. He was this beautiful person to me. And as I look back and I try to find these hard memories with these people that have passed away, there's none. They all treated me very, very well. They all loved me very well. All that love was gone in that year. My aunt, I still have remnants of my aunt that, as a reminder, we were at a hotel one time, and mom and dad were like, we're going down to the bar or whatever. Don't slam the doors, you get your fingers caught. First thing my sister does, slam the door and breaks my fingernail off. Well, my aunt, I remember her, she comes up to me and she's like, it's okay, honey. I'll take care of you. And she was the nurse, so she, wrapped my finger and gave me a pep talk and loved on me. And she was just so angelic in so many ways that when I lost her, when we all lost her, it profoundly affected me in not just birthdays, but in so many ways. I lost one person that I knew wholeheartedly loved me. And then my grandfathers. And then, so we moved to Colorado that year. And I got, or somewhere in that area, that 9, 10-year-old range, we moved. So got that, my two grandparents, my aunt, all died. And then we get to Colorado, and a few months into Colorado, my dad leaves in an abrupt, nightmarish destruction of the home. And I'm out playing football with the guys, and he drives up, and I see his face, and I know exactly what happened. He says, hey, Britt, I'm leaving. I'm done. I knew it. He was done. He couldn't do it anymore. He couldn't fight anymore. He couldn't take being attacked anymore. And I say being attacked because I've seen my mom attack over nothing. My stepdad was sitting in a chair enjoying himself right next, just about on the cusp of Christmas, and she took a router that I bought him and threw it at his head and hit him in the head. And he's a Green Beret. How he didn't kill her, I have no idea. But I stepped in, there's a lot of those fights that I stepped in between and was willing to take the brunt of it. But it was enough to separate my mom from her craziness and for this wall of pure fury to stop and say, I'm not doing this shit anymore. So I got in the middle of that a lot. And luckily, there was only a couple times between stepdads and boyfriends that there was actual physical violence from them. Because at some point I got big enough where I became formidable. And then you throw rage on top of that, and I become very dangerously formidable, and which is terrifying in and of itself. So we're still on 10, I know, and we'll bounce a little bit because I'm not as fluent as your other people, but we'll get there. So my dad leaves in a fury, and within probably a month, I'm guessing, within a month, because my mom's erratic and she just does whatever's in her mind at that moment, and she just reacts to it. She commits suicide. And without trying to get confirmation, my sister confirmed that she was dead for 17 minutes. That's what I thought, but I was like, that's an awful long time to be dead. And then through doing research, I guess it's possible. It's just not common. But they brought her back. And I remember standing in the hospital and I was alone, and nobody had spoken to me. My sister, from what I remember, was sitting behind me, and people are just passing. It's one of those movie scenes where you're just totally alone. And I didn't know what to do with that. They saved her. They ended up sending her to a mental hospital. We go live with my dad, which was great. His girlfriend was really nice to us. My dad was a very, very nice man. He passed away this last year. He was an incredible man, incredibly nice man. Just everybody loved him. He was warm. He was welcoming. He smiled. He didn't have a lot of depth, but he made people feel good when he was around them. He was also a very formidable man. He was a Golden Glove boxer, controlled. He was very controlled. Not a man you wanted to make angry, but it was hard to make him angry. And the stories I've heard about him and his growing up and fighting people just had a lot of respect for my father. So, which in turn I do too. I have a ton of respect for my father. Always have. I would have never talked back to my father the way my children have talked to me, but that's not here or there. I mean, they have their reasons. But I figured when he was about 76, I could probably beat him up by then. And I was in my 40s, supposed to be at my prime. I still was questioning whether I could take my dad. He was a hell of a man. So yeah, 10 years old, the suicide, I just shattered at that point. And then going to school with kids that didn't want to be around me. My cousins didn't want to be around me. This was my dad's side of the cousins, which I knew and I understood because I was a weird kid. I didn't function well in society. I was a very loose cannon. If somebody touched me wrong, grabbed me wrong, I would go into fits of rage and tantrums. And so I became, and that's when I think the abuse stopped, the sexual abuse. I don't know if there was one incident or if there was years of it, because I have no recollection of that. But assumptively, the way I felt, up until I was 36, I had that pretty consistently for a lot of years of my life. And then one summer I went home to visit my grandparents in Iowa, and I was 12 years old at this time. I come back and I've got a new family, people I've never heard about, never known about. I was gone for a month, maybe 2 months. My mom's remarried. I've got a stepdad who's a Green Beret and 4 new step siblings, which was incredibly devastating for me. And that's when I started experimenting with suicide. Started experimenting with cutting to see if I could take the pain, to see what the results might be. Started doing a little, as much research as you could back then as a 12 years old to find out what methods would be permanent. So my sister kind of walked in on that one time, and I kind of explained to her that I was depressed and suicidal, and nothing ever came of that. And then I just kind of lost it. I was in so many ways, I was such a terrible person. I was disassociated from most things. I had hurt my cousin one time, and I think I broke his nose. And I just remember staring at him and not really having any feeling about it. And I had situations like that on several occasions where I was very disassociated as a kid. And as I go, these things have, as I've come to this journey coming here, some of these things have come up because, I'm naturally going through my story and trying to articulate it just for even myself out loud.
And you're driving across country?
Yeah. Yeah.
Just driving alone makes you,
oh yeah,
it puts your mind in a different state.
Yeah.
Where you can access things you never could otherwise.
Yeah, I've had some serious breakthroughs on this journey, which is amazing. That it's happening now, because what I tell people is I found life at the end of my life.
How old are you now?
53. So I'm the perfect demographic for a suicide. I'm white, male, in my 50s. I think it's 25 to 50s or something like that is the demographic for the most suicides completed, or successful suicides. Women tend to commit suicide more often, or try to more often, but men are more intentional. They have greater means, or the gun is usually the biggest means of making sure it's done right. Sometimes that fails, and those are horrific and ugly pictures if you've ever seen somebody who's failed at shooting themselves. It's pretty ugly. So that's not my method. I want to be successful. I've not been successful at anything in my life. I was going to make sure this was one thing I did not fail at.
Why do you think you're so serious about committing suicide?
Well, I'll tell you.
We're going to get to that.
Yeah, it's been a pretty horrific existence for me.
But you're a survivor.
I am, and today I would tell you I'm probably the strongest man I know, because of what I've endured for such a long period of time, and how I've not taken my life or died in the process of, because there's this time frame where I didn't have the balls to take my life. I didn't have the guts. So we'll fast forward a little bit here into my teens. When I was 18, I checked myself into a treatment center. I was smoking weed and drinking on the weekends, but those became excessive. Like, I drank to just disappear. I did drugs to disappear, to get out of my head. And so at 18, I was like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I'm graduated, my friends are gone, they're all going to college. I barely made it out of school. one of my stipulations in high school was if I don't graduate, I'm killing myself. And I went to my teacher, and I had almost all Fs, and they all just gave me Ds and pushed me through the system. But I had always been pushed through the system, even as a young kid, because they didn't know how to deal with me. They tried to put me in special ed. My mom did, because I was so torn apart.
What was the problem that you were?
I was crying every day in school. I cried every day, every single day. I was tormented every day by just me. And then you show that to your peers, and your peers are not very likely to want to be around you at all, ever. And then that probably profoundly affected my cousins. At the time, I know it was difficult for them to be around me, but I've always had a sense for people. Like, me being able to be presentable right now is, I'm a mashup of many, many different personalities.
Yeah, but just meeting you, you seem calm, intelligent, likable.
Yeah, I think so.
You don't seem to be somebody who's
right
on the edge.
I know. I'm terrified right now. I'm afraid of everything. Everything I've ever done, or every step I've ever taken, I've been afraid. But I have this thing, and I think it's a nutty gene. I face my fears, and I face them all the time. Like rock climbing, I'm terrified of heights, but I'll rock climb, I'll rappel, I'll jump out of a plane because I'm terrified of heights.
Have you always done this?
What's that?
Have you always been this way?
Yeah. Well, no, probably when I checked myself into treatment is when I first started experimenting with facing those fears, because I checked myself into an AA program, and I white knuckled for 2 years. I was sober for 17 years. But a lot of that taught me how to be honest, because I was a full-blown liar. By the time I was 18 years old, I mean, I just lie, steal, everything. It just didn't matter to me. Hurt people. In my rage, would hurt people. Yeah. But anyway, I definitely, fear is something that, if I were to succumb to it, I definitely would not be sitting here right now. I was afraid of LA. I'm afraid to come into LA. I've told you yesterday. I asked you about Skid Row, and I'm like, I don't have the balls to go down there by myself, but I'll go there because I'm afraid. But I know how to ease myself into things.
No, Skid Row. You're not missing anything by missing Skid Row.
Yeah,
it's just dirty.
I know. But it's the ugly part of. It's probably one of the most profound places in our country for the homeless and the mental health.
Yeah, it's interesting for sure.
Yeah. So and if I look at that, I feel very, very privileged that even in my situation, that I'm not there. And that almost, I don't know if that sounds judgmental or not. It's not the way it's meant to sound. It's that I had something in me that said, that's not what I want to be. I've been on the street several times. I've been homeless several times, but never to a point where I didn't try to get out of it, or try to make something happen, or try to just be a functional part of society. And
have you had jobs?
Oh, I've had a lot of jobs. Yeah. I'm a jack of all trades. I can do just about anything. I can figure things out.
You spent most of your time in what state?
Indiana. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've been in Indiana 30 years.
Northern or southern?
Northern, yeah.
So close to?
South Bend, Fort Wayne.
Purdue.
In that area.
Yeah.
Yeah, close to the Purdue area. But, well, not Purdue, I'm sorry. Notre Dame, close to Notre Dame.
Oh, Notre Dame, that's right.
Yeah. That's South Bend. So.
South Bend.
Yeah, I've been there for 30 years. It was not the place that I wanted to be for 30 years. I had met my wife, my ex-wife, when I was 23. She was running away from her family came to Colorado with a family. We met. I tried to not be in a relationship with her. I was pretty damn mean at that point. And she stuck around and we got married. And I figured, well, this is just what's in store for me, so I might as well just get married. I mean, it wasn't done out of love or like, which is a shame because I robbed her of that. I don't know that I've ever been able to love per se. I've had moments of euphoric love, but those don't seem to, they're not sustainable.
Did you feel you loved as a kid?
No, not at all. Not at all. My dad was so absent and my mom was so abusive. My mom, when I was 17 years old, I came home one night. This is just an example of kind of the irrational part of who she is. I come home one night and she's like, I love you so much. You're so blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, thanks, Mom. And she saw a brush on the table, picked it up and started smacking me with it, beating me with it in the face, and started calling me a faggot. She's like, you're nothing but a faggot, and started just beating me. I'm like, and it confused me, so I didn't react. I'm like, why? Like, you can't even make sense of it. One second you're love, the next you're pure hate. And that was, I think, an example of everything up to this point. I mean, the fist fights, the smacking me around when I never hit her back. I mean, I did pick her up and throw her once because of her beating my sister. And I put her in jail, and then the whole family turned on me. So I don't have much relationship with them since that point. But there was a point in my life where I just started standing for myself. My sister used to beat the shit out of me. And one day she came up and punched me from behind right in the face, just kind of hooked around. And I just kind of dropped my head and turned slow towards her. And she knew that was the last time she'd ever hit me. Because now I'm to a point where that's not going to happen again. I'll become enraged. One of the things I learned about myself is when I get calm is when I'm most dangerous. Like if I'm angry and then I calm, I'm definitely, it's not the rage rage is terrifying. It's ugly. It's horrifying. It creates so much damage just in and of itself. But I always had enough, we'll say, control that I never physically hurt anybody the way I should have killed people with the rage that I feel. But I did not. Still haven't. Thank God. It's like the stories you hear of road rage. Well, that's how I lived my life, just walking around. It was just, I get set off by so many things. I still get set off by so many things. I mean, that's part of it. It gets old being angry. It gets old being ugly. It's very difficult to walk around with this thing that haunts you on a regular basis. But
the suicidal thoughts have been with you since when?
12.
12.
Yeah. And heavily. I mean, there's been very few days, and I say days, that I haven't thought about suicide in some form or fashion. Sometimes I'll get a week. Sometimes I'll get 2 weeks of reprieve, but never more than that. They've obviously been diagnosed with like mania. And
have you ever been diagnosed with like borderline personality disorder?
Bipolar.
Well, bipolar is not quite borderline. Borderline men and women tend to be much more suicidal.
Okay.
Like
it's possible.
I interviewed one young man in New York who was trying to commit suicide over and over again. He drove his car full speed into a brick wall trying to kill himself. Showed up for the interview with a broken leg. He was unsuccessful. But they tend to be serious about trying to off themselves.
Yeah. I'm not a spontaneous suicidal. Now, have I been at that point? Yes. Even recently, I almost took my life 2.5 weeks ago out of spontaneity. And I don't know why I didn't, actually. But that's not generally who I've been. I think walking towards my death and walking towards my date, walking towards my plan, well, it's very difficult to complete that task when you have things that are important in life. It made me angry, is what it did.
You're healthy?
Diabetic. I mean, I live in a lot of pain.
You seem fairly healthy, and you're
Yeah.
intelligent. You have probably a nice life, it looks like.
No.
No?
No. Actually, I don't even know how I'm going to get back to Colorado from here. So
Are you living in your car?
Yeah.
Oh, you are?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, in simple terms, I've squandered my life. I have. It's not that I haven't tried. I've tried several businesses, failed at every single one of them. I was a carpenter for 30 years, and if I would have just had some fortitude and not depressed, I could have made that a nice career, but that was not the case.
Do you have any highlights in your life? What were the best times that you remember?
Probably my daughter. When I found out my wife was pregnant, it's probably when I realized it's what kind of, well, I was going to be a father. I was going to be responsible for life. I didn't want kids. I didn't want anything to bring kids into this world, this nightmare that I lived. And then she was born, and man, I'll tell you, a daughter will change your heart. So they'll teach you how to love. They'll calm things that you never thought you could get rid of or calm down. And she did that for me. And for the first 6 years of her life, her and I were thick as thieves. And, I'm really good at, I love kids. I think they're the most pure thing in the world that we have. And if you want to touch the divine, you see it in kids because they see it all. They see the world for what it really is. And I think that's such a beautiful thing. And then my son, and he wasn't supposed to happen. My wife had, uterine cancer or something like that at the time, so she was supposed to have a hysterectomy. And so she wasn't supposed to, we were getting ready to go have this done, and we find out we're pregnant with my son, which was unbelievable. Huge miracle for both of us. And then those are probably my two best things. They're also probably some of my hardest things, because as I sit here today, my girls don't talk to me, my two older girls. So I have 4 kids. I adopted 2 girls from my sister's side when they were 2 and 8. And my kids would have been 3 and 9. So very close in age. So I have 4 children, and which was also a highlight of my life, was now to give them an opportunity, and they took full advantage of that, and they have become incredible young women to what they could have been and what they were growing up in. And that having been around meth and just all kinds of drugs and the pornography and stuff like that, it was horrific on them. It was hard for them, and we got to pull them out of that. Now my sister is doing much better. But
you're not talking with some of your kids?
My oldest daughter, who's my biological, and my middle daughter, who's adopted. They're my girls. They're my daughters, but we'll just, for information's sake, we'll keep it in line that way. My older daughter, which is probably good reason. I don't know the full reason, but I can only anticipate or not anticipate, articulate maybe, that from her standpoint, my anger became very detrimental for her to deal with. And she's got 3 sons, so I don't get to see them now, which has been like, I missed a lot of my kids growing up. I missed a lot of, being a divorced dad and only being a part-time dad. Well, I just become a part-time babysitter because I have no rights and I can't even tell them when they can get their hair cut. And so I just became part-time every other weekend and once a week for a couple hours. And that was really to give the ex-wife time to do what she wanted to do and go play. It wasn't time. Again, I couldn't discipline them. I couldn't say anything to them. I couldn't even give them a haircut without needing permission. And I missed a lot of their growing up, their antics and their words and the things that they do and the playful stuff and the bad things. And I missed all that. And then my daughter takes my grandsons away, and I'm going to miss that. So I feel this devastation here, and I feel this devastation here. So, and then there's the childhood of mine that is devastating to me. And I failed at my jobs. I failed at every relationship I've ever had. I've destroyed everything, squandered every penny I've ever made. Not intentionally, but even like this, even walking towards my death, I'm like, I've got 6 months. I'm going to go enjoy myself. I'm going to go do what I've always wanted to do and travel the country and just get a bunch of credit cards and squander it and just say, fuck it. And that's the path I was on until I started walking towards trying to help people like me. And which is a huge contradiction because I'm still on my path. But I also have a huge heart for people that suffer. Doing what I'm doing right now has allowed me to view people in a very different light, and that is everybody has a story. You know this. Everybody is important. Everybody counts now. From the people that have hurt me to the people that I don't know. All matter. And that is very, very unlike me because I don't like people in my nature. I actually had a very large distaste for humanity. I see the detriment in our society. I don't have to read the news. I don't have to look at anything. I can feel the crap that's going on in our world, in our country. I know it's these declines and this detriment to who we are as a humanity.
But you found something that gives you meaning now.
I did, yeah. For the first time in my life, yeah, really.
Which is great.
Yes.
Has that derailed your plans to kill yourself?
No, it has not. It's almost a shame because finding purpose, my purpose coincides with what I'm going to do. So it's like, I don't know how to reconcile that at this point. But I'm sure it will work itself out. I have a faith-based walk in life per se, a very angry one, but that faith has allowed me to step through your door today, because I also face my fears in that spiritual realm. I got married at 23, had my daughter, and then my son, and they grew up in a house full of rage. a house that was full of fighting 3 to 5 times a week.
You have a temper.
Oh, big temper, yeah.
You get that from your mom?
I want to say yes. I want to say that I get a lot of my kindness from my father and a lot of my rage from my mother, which is probably true. But I think the trauma, the childhood trauma does a lot. Like even if they didn't have it and these things would have happened to me, I wasn't able to talk about it. I wasn't able to tell anybody. So I think I would have developed that rage either way. And when it set in deep.
Have you seen therapists?
Yeah, I went to therapy from 10 to 47. Problem is, which I didn't realize until even recently, is that I'm pretty intelligent. Didn't know that. But every time I went to a counselor or a therapist, I already knew more about myself than what they did because I'm so introspective. I'm always thinking. So one of my other really early childhood memories is when I was 5 and my mom's looking at me through the door and my sister's kind of crouched over her shoulder and they're squatted down in the doorway and they're apologizing to me. And I realized in this moment that this is not the way life was supposed to be, that at that 5 years old, that something was very inherently wrong with the world, not just my situation, but the world. So that has transferred throughout my life also. And that's why I know if I read the news, it just reinforces and I get angry and angry and angry because I can't reconcile the detriment. It'd be probably something like what you struggle with. I assume you struggle with going down to Skid Row and seeing
so much negativity.
Yeah. And it is very difficult. And you can lead people to getting help, but you can't make them get help.
They don't want it. They don't want it.
They don't want it.
And most don't.
And which is ironic because somebody like me, I'll take it all day long. It's just never. The first time therapy stuck was when I was 47. And I had a really good therapist. She's actually in San Diego now. And she just listened to me. I walked into her office. I'm like, I'm suicidal. If you're going to send me to the hospital, I'll prove you wrong. So I really just need to talk about this. And that's what I did for 3 years with her. And, then it developed and I found joy, actually. And I got some of this stuff out and I was able to work through it. And the amazing part was that I found joy. For the first time in my life, I was actually not happy, but joyful. Nothing had changed. My situation hadn't changed. My finances hadn't changed. I'm still on the decline, but I found joy and I found hope and I found solace and rest. And then come May of last year, 2023, I woke up one day and I just couldn't do it anymore. One of my things was if this ever returned, these negative thoughts, this suicidal, like I live every single day wanting to die. And if that returned, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to think like this anymore. And I've done the work. It's not that I haven't done the work. I've done the work. I've read the books. I've done the prayers. I've done the counseling. I've spent my life trying to get rid of this rage that dwells deep inside me that creates so much shame for me. Even when I get angry, I'm just like shameful. It's shameful to me, the way I deal with life in those moments. So it returned, and the suicidal thoughts returned in December of 2022. Some friends of mine were like, they didn't know this, but they're like, we think you should go to San Diego and be part of Teen Challenge. And when you graduate, we'll hire you and you'll be able to speak and, do what you're good at. be in front of people and try to help people. And that was real promising for me. I just had to do their year program, get indoctrinated with their Jesus, however they do that, and come out and I get to speak to people to find the one that's struggling. Well, that lasted about 3.5 weeks. As soon as I stepped off the plane and into the van to go to Teen Challenge, I knew I'd made one of the biggest mistakes of my life.
Why do you feel it was a mistake?
I don't know. Everything worked out so well, like perfectly, until I stepped in the van to go to this treatment facility. I was like, I think I just made the biggest mistake of my life. And I was right. Not of my life, but I made a huge mistake. In some regard, now that I look at it from at today, it may be like I wouldn't change the events of my life, not one of them, which is the ironic thing, to be where I'm at right now in life, to have found life at the end of life. I would not change one damn thing that's ever happened to me. San Diego was necessary. I met some really cool guys there. I learned to face my fear when it came to dangerous people, dangerous men. They're gang members. You know, it was 35 gang members and 2 white boys and a black guy. I mean, it's like, I loved it. I didn't know I would love it, but I loved being around them. But I ended up becoming somewhat of counsel for these guys because the staff wasn't doing what they were supposed to do at the time. And it was very disorganized and kind of a mess. So I became counsel, not just to the people residing there, but also some of the staff.
But that's not enough to prevent you from...
I was there to be taught. So I was there to learn. I was there to be mentored, and there was no mentorship, and there was no discipleship, and it was just a bunch of old white guys that had money, giving their money to this program, and then they would come in and indoctrinate these Hispanic men and confuse them because they all had different theologies. And I realized that that's not the place I needed to be. And indoctrination is not what I enjoy anyway. If I take anything from the Bible, it's that I want to love people wholeheartedly. I just want to love people. And when I can do that, then I can start preaching maybe. I don't even want to do that. But I do want to love people. And I've learned how to do that fairly well. I'm getting better at it as I walk in life, especially as I walk in the last 6 months. My heart's been really open to, again, people's stories are one of the most incredible things that you can give somebody is to listen to who they are. And then as you listen to them, walk beside them and not try to change them or try to make anything better. It's just, if you can give them an Easter egg of how to function in life a little bit better, and they can apply that on a regular basis, that Easter egg, then I think purpose has something. We're always thinking about purpose as a job or something we do. Now, I have purpose right now, but one of my biggest things that I've found is finding people and relating to them. And I hugged a lady a week ago. I don't hug strangers. I don't touch strangers. And I was like, hey, can I give you a hug? Because of what I'm doing, I just talk to people now, and I'm becoming something far better than I ever thought I could be, which is amazing in and of itself.
So let's talk about your plan to commit suicide. You have it planned out?
I do. Yep.
How would you do it?
Well, that's the secret. It's something that nobody can take away from me.
Got it.
My date is the secret because there's an element of me that just wants, when I get close, I'll disappear. My people know. My people know.
Do you have friends around you that are trying to stop you,
I wouldn't say they're trying to stop me. They're
trying to help you,
what's that?
trying to help you or see another way?
Not even necessarily help me. So I'll go through this with you because it is odd and it is uncanny for somebody like me to go and tell people. When I decided this in May, I planned it and I was like, okay, I got this, I got the date, I got the method, I got the place. So the prior 3 times I haven't had a place, and I just kind of got pulled back into life in some inadvertent ways. And this was before I found joy. This was 6 years ago was my last planning of taking my life. And so as I woke up and I tell my friends, well, I grew up in a community or have been in a community for the last 30 years that is it's the Bible Belt of the Midwest. Very conservative Christian. So as long as there's belief in what they believe, then you're okay. But if you venture outside that, you're not okay. Probably going to hell. That's my understanding. Well, I was a Christian for 15 years. I'm not a Christian anymore. I won't claim Christianity again. I don't think I'm worthy of that title. And I don't think most of the people I ever met are worthy of that title. To represent something that I find very beautiful, and that's Christ. I've done a very poor job of that. So for me to enter into this, well, I'm Christian and holier than thou and whatever. But I told my friends and they said, well, you're going to go to hell. Not just once, but several times. And then I was called a coward by one of my friends who didn't even know the story. It was just hearsay without asking me. So I started eliminating people from my life at that point also. The people I told, some people walked away, some people got angry. As I went down my list, which I thought was only 3 to 5 people, it became a list of 20. And I started feeling those feelings that they might feel from their perspective the night before I would go and tell them, which was hard on me. And then I would feel those feelings at the point that I would tell them. And after 20 of those episodes, I decided to do something uncanny, and that was try to help people like me. And one of my friends I had met, she's highly suicidal. I had met her a couple years ago, and I had met her at a bonfire one night, and just kind of noticed something. Just something wasn't right. So I asked her how she was doing, and blah blah. Well, 2 hours later, we're in full conversation about her life and her struggles and stuff like that. 2 years later, fast forward, I'm sitting down with her, and she goes, you saved my life. I was like, what do you mean? She's like, you remember that night we met? I was like, yeah. She goes, I was going to go take my life that night. And I realized at that point, all I've ever done is check on her. All I've ever done is walk beside her, understand her, try to provide some semblance of help or of trying to help her move forward. Well, that apparently has been enough to keep her alive for a long enough time to where she's still searching. Is it over for her? No, she's tormented. But is there hope for her? Absolutely. She's still here. She's not gone. I know this is going to sound, well, you're still here. Trust me, I know. Gone through all these conversations. But hopefully, with what I'm doing, I'm raising money to help people get counseling or a jump start with psilocybin therapy or ketamine or something that's going to jumpstart them, and then they can continue that through in some sort of therapy would be ideal. But again, leading people and giving them opportunity doesn't mean they'll necessarily take it, which is I find difficult to wrap my head around, because for somebody like me, I welcome the help. I'm not too ashamed to say I'm broken and I need it. But which will bring me to my date in a few weeks is no longer, unfortunately. I say unfortunately because I've been looking forward to this for some time. I'm at 8 months now and I'm really close. And before on my way here, I had a meeting with a couple guys, and they convinced me I was invited to a intense therapy ranch in Colorado for 6 weeks. And I decided to do it. Because my thought is, if it doesn't work, I can just do it after. But if it does, then there's something for people like me that is hopeful. So I'm kind of an experiment right now. Through this process of me telling people, I told my pastor and good friend who's I've been close with for 30 years. And he's like, Britton, in 40 years of being a pastor, nobody's ever come to me with this, of wanting to take their life and just being so candid about it. And I realized that there was no voice for people like me. There's never has been a voice for people like me. And the more I talk about it, the less pressure I feel on a regular basis, which is crazy, because I see people and I talk to them and they tell their story to me, and I can watch for the first time this stuff melt away that binds them, even if it's for a moment. They get to uninhibitedly tell me their story, and I'll listen, and I can relate to them. And you may have seen this with what you do. There's a release that happens. Does it come back? Probably, for sure. Is it permanent? No. But the more that they get to talk about it, and then they have somebody that they can talk about it with, it's hard not to recognize that there's potential and hope there for them, just by releasing some of this information.
And you're moving forward with this because you're losing hope?
No. I'm moving forward with taking my life because I'm tormented daily, regularly. I have a smile. I have joy. I have happiness in my life. Like, if I were to show you the video of me seeing my first big cactus, that's the happiest I've ever been in my life. It's the most joy I've ever felt in my life. Even my buddy, I sent it to him. He was like, "That's the happiest I've ever seen you." I was like, "That's the happiest I've ever been." It's right here, these big Arizona cactus, and I've never seen them. It was unbelievable.
So tell me quickly about your podcast.
It's called The Suicide Monk. It started out of my desire to go take my own life, and also simultaneously trying to save a friend's life. So 50% of the podcast was started because of me wanting to go take my life. The other part was I realized that I could potentially help save her life by raising money and helping her get therapy.
What have you learned from doing this?
Wow. Even when you have the money raised, it's hard to get people to do therapy because there's so many conditions behind their trauma that won't allow them to go and talk about it. And one of the things, especially, she's my first episode, and we kind of talked about this a little bit, but as she told me her story, I watched the weight come off of her shoulders because she's harbored these things in her childhood for so long. She's been, we did the math one day, and it's not on the podcast, but she was raped 9 times and she was molested from 6 to 14. She's a cutter and she's got all these other different things. And what I realized through being friends with her is that I've never tried to change her, but I'm always there to listen uninhibitedly. God, I did it again. But the whole thing is, and that's why the podcast is what it is. I want people to be able to tell their stories uninhibitedly so they can start to find solace in community and this path that they're on to take their life. And that's one of the things I said earlier is like, go tell people, but tell people and then talk about it. I mean, if you can talk about this stuff with somebody that will listen, I love listening to this. This is where I thrive. I live in the darkness, but this is my light in the darkness. And always willing to, it doesn't even have to be on camera or on, like, it's anonymous, my podcast, if you want to be anonymous. But let's get the stories out there, because in our society today, we're 24% of our society is suicide ideology. Really? That's a pretty hefty amount. And then all the mental health problems on top of that. So I believe if people start to talk and start to tell their story, and then metaphorically start dying to the things that bind them. Mine is actually walking towards my death, but I got rid of all my possessions, told all my friends. I prepared myself for death. And in the process of doing that, I found life. But I got rid of the things that held me back for so long. And that's certain friendships, certain relationships, material possessions. If I would have done this without actually physically walking towards my death, I would find life in that also, just like I've done now. And that's one of the things that's kind of sad but beautiful is as I've walked towards my death, I have found life, and I found beauty, and I found purpose, and I found something that I could have never manifested on my own without putting my fingers in the air and telling everybody to fuck off. I'm going to go do this. But I've also allowed them to walk beside me in this. And that's one of the things that I hope to accomplish also, is to provide an avenue, an ear, a hug for my people, as I call them, my suicidal people, to find solace and comfort, even for just a moment, because we don't get it very often. We don't get peace of mind very often. We don't get to tell our stories very often. So that's what I would hope.
And the website is?
thesuicidemonk.com.
There we go.
And there's Spotify on there, GoFundMe, for people that need help with therapy, Patreon if they want to support me, and all the helplines. But it's improving and getting better. But so often we think that our story's not as horrific as other people's, and it's not. Mine's not as horrific as another person's. And you've seen that. Mine is minimal compared to what you've seen on the street. But everybody's got a story. Everybody's important. And everybody counts, and your story counts. So tell it, and tell it to the people that you love and love you. And if you think you don't have people that love you, go start telling people. You'll find out real quick how many people love you. It's amazing. People I never thought would give a shit have stepped up to the pump. I mean, and just been supportive and encouraging and loving. So that's about all I got, Mark.
All right. Britton, thank you so much for sharing your story.
Thanks for having me.
I don't look forward to your future. I hope you find another way. I hope you find something that changes your path.
Well, I mean, I do too, but I also don't. So,
is hope run out?
There's a saying that David Goggins has that really pisses me off because I'm not a huge fan. because he pisses me off. But he says, don't quit when you're tired, quit when you're done. I'm pretty damn close to done. I'm well beyond tired that I've ever been. But those words have kept me going because I'm not done yet. So we'll see. We'll see how things play out. I go to the treatment center in April, and it's intense psilocybin therapy. So we'll see. I'm about 30% hopeful in that. I will tell you that I went from 90% going to take my life because I gave it 10% leadway to I'm about 60% I'm going to live. 40% I'm going to die. Which is a pretty good ratio, I think. That's pretty hefty from coming from 90%. But
I won't say anything. All right.
You can if you want.
I did at the very beginning of this, I think. All right. Britton, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.